Hi, I'm Coach Mea, your host. Thank you all for tuning in to Glow 365, which equals greater level of wellness. It's September, which is National Sickle Cell Awareness Month. In this episode of Glow, our special guest is Carla Lewis, who will give us a better understanding of children with sickle cell and some wellness tips. But before we get started, allow me to introduce my co host, who is a certified life purpose coach, a life story coach, and a certified relationship coach, and the founder of Sisters of Faith and 360. Hey, girl, Lady
Hey
Q.
girl. Hey girl, how you doing? I'm glad to be here today.
Hey, it's always glad to be seen.
Yes. And I'm excited about today's show. Really am.
Okay. In our previous episode, we had talked about happiness happens month, and sister, my happiness is gone because I just got my second COVID shot, and girl, that ain't no joke.
I'm
So
sure.
I
So we
need to
gotta
bring it
find
back.
that happiness. We gotta get that happiness back, right?
I'm telling you, yeah, I might need to watch that show again and kind of get it back because, yeah, I'm telling the Lord has been testing me, and
Uh-huh.
but I'm happy to be alive, and I know it's something. It's a choice that we make
Right.
with this whole vaccine, and for me with underlying conditions, um, I have to protect myself, so that's why I chose to get the vaccine. But hey, it is what it is, and it's a part of life.
Right. I
So
mean,
how
that's
was
something that
yours?
we gotta be mindful of is, those that do have underlying issues, making sure that they do what they need to do to be safe as well. Not just take the vaccine, but also, the extra precautions with that.
That is so true. you know how did you enjoy the show last month?
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed the happiness show. Anything to bring back more happiness, and then the words of affirmation that was given, because a lot of times we can be in a space or in a rut, or just dealing with some things, and waking up in the morning speaking those words of affirmation can be helpful throughout the course of our day. So I enjoyed the show. I enjoyed the tips that was given to us, and even our guests. So yes, we all need a little bit more happiness every day.
Awesome. So I'm excited for this show this evening. Let me introduce our special guest again. Her name is Carla Lewis. She is the founder, president, and CEO of Kids Conquering Sickle Cell Disease Foundation, co-founder and chief director of the Young Adult Sickle Cell Alliance, certified hemoglobinopathy I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced that properly. Council, certified national sickle cell research advocate, and facilitator, patient engagement consultant. Carla, welcome to Glow.
Okay, so I'm getting used to this, even though we've been doing this over almost 2 years now, more Zoom, but prior to that, but it's still something to get used to. I am so happy to be at Glow. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and this is Sickle Cell Awareness Month, so it means a lot to me to share education and just key things about sickle cell, and just to share a little bit about my journey also. So I am so happy to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Carla. And I just, want to share a few things before we get into the discussion of kids, coping with sickle cell. But September is dedicated by Congress to help focus on the attention on the need for research and treatment for sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease affects millions of people throughout the world. Let me share some data and stats. September, again, is dedicated to help, I guess, bring awareness to, sickle cell and, the people that it affects. And among those whose ancestors came from Sub-Saharan Africa, Spanish-speaking regions, and Western Hemisphere, South America, the Caribbean and Central America, Saudi Arabia, India, the Mediterranean countries, such as Turkey, Greece, and Italy. It is estimated that sickle cell affects approximately 10,000 Americans, occurs among about 1 out of every 365 Black or African American births, occurs among 1 out of every 6,300 Hispanic American births, about in 1 in 13 Blacks or African American babies is born with sickle cell trait. Carla,
Yes.
why the focus is on African American and Hispanics?
So with the data, not really the focus, but the data that they have pretty much was from some studies they have done and in the past where they have an estimate. Pretty much worldwide, sickle cell estimated to have pretty much have diagnosed right now about 100 million people diagnosed worldwide. So when we think about globally, this is an estimate and the data is outnumbered because we have not had surveillance diagnosed worldwide. So we have not have surveillance on sickle cell, being that there was no funding directed towards such study. So the data is pretty much outdated, but we do know that in the past, they have done some studies and that was the estimate that they came up with. And we even say 100,000 now in the US, we know it's much more than that. But that is from past outdated data that we still do go by. We do know that it is it's under rare disease, even though it's the most common blood disorder.
Now, for those that don't know what sickle cell is, can you explain? And also, is it a generic condition?
Okay. Sickle cell disease is a group of hemoglobin disorders, pretty much when the one parent contributes an S gene and an abnormal gene. Sorry, an abnormal S gene and a normal gene. So when sickle cells basically have an abnormal shape, we call it almost like a sickle, which is a farm tool. And can you show the picture again? So as you see, these round cells are the ones that are pretty much more oxygenated, and the sickle cells tend to have less lifespan and they don't last as long and basically causing complication of anemia and some other complications. But also you can see the sickled cells are hard, they're sticky, where other cells, normal cells, will go smoothly through the vessels. With sickle cell disease, it has the complication of getting clogging cells, which makes it hard for oxygen to be delivered to the organs. With our hemoglobin basically delivers our oxygen. So having sickle cell disease, which is having an abnormal gene, two abnormal genes, and two abnormal genes, that means a sickle gene and another abnormal gene. So it could be another sickle cell gene, but a normal sickle gene, all in the anemia family, and pretty much causing some complications. And I'll go into complications a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Now, how does it manifest in children through the sickle cell trait?
Okay, so sickle cell trait. I want to explain the trait a little bit. So sickle cell trait is very important that we know our status. And what I mean status, our gene status. Normally you get one normal cell from a parent and from your other parent, say the mom will give an abnormal a normal gene A and also another normal gene. Then, with having a child, they will produce pretty much a child with no abnormality of a gene, having two normal genes. With having a parent with the trait, this is an unaffected carrier. So as I'm looking at this, unaffected. Okay, so I'm looking at this. There is a 100% chance that the child will come out with no abnormality like sickle cell. Now it'll be a little bit different if one parent has an abnormal gene, sickle gene, abnormal or sickle gene, and then the other parent also has an abnormal gene. So with that, the parent has a 25% chance of having a child with sickle cell disease, and also another 25% chance as and this is two parents with the trait, a 25% chance that the child will come out with no abnormalities because both of the parents can give the normal gene that they have, and then a 50% chance that each one of them will give maybe one normal and then one sickle. So there is some abnormality that may possibly happen with having a child with the trait, and that's 50% if two parents have the trait. Now it's a little bit different if both of them have the disease. Then it's more than likely that the child will be born with the disease because there's no normal gene that is passed. So children, the question, can you repeat the question when you regards to children exactly?
How does it manifest in children through the sickle cell trait?
Okay, so with children having the trait, one thing that we're lucky for right now is actually the newborn screening. So right now we are blessed actually that in the US we have the newborn screening, which pretty much detects sickle cell trait as well as sickle cell disease. So within children, they are detected pretty early in the United States. We didn't have that luxury a long time ago. And thankfully now those that have concern about their child having sickle cell or basically any hemoglobin can actually ask for a test called the electrophoresis test. And that test actually tests for any abnormal hemoglobin disorder. So this particular test is what is now being used. Now, sickle cell traits impacts children that they should always know their hemoglobin status up until adulthood, because the likelihood of childbearing and for them to know the possibility of having a child with sickle cell disease or trait is important to know, because sickle cell disease is a chronic disorder. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier about sickle cell disease, which I'll go back to, sickle cell affects the hemoglobin. So with the hemoglobin being affected, oftentimes there's complications such as anemia. Related to sickle cell disease, other complications occur, which is mild to severe pain. Can you bring up that slide again with the cell? Awesome. When these sickled cells are trying to pass through the vein, and sometimes they get clogged, like I mentioned. And with that clog, it also causes the complication of oxygen being transported, which impacts the lungs, which impacts every single organ, because our organs need that oxygen. The hearts, one of the complications within children with sickle cell disease is also stroke. Stroke also tends to occur also in adults, but it has been studied before that silent stroke is an issue with sickle cell disease. So oftentimes a child may be doing, poorly in school, and the parent may not know that that particular child may have had a silent stroke. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about both, because we talk about sickle cell. We have to also understand having sickle cell trait. Those that have sickle cell trait also have some sickle. They make sickle cells, but they also make normal cells. Remember, I said that you have a parent that contributed both genes, an abnormal gene and an abnormal gene and a normal gene. So when I speak about abnormal gene and having an actual normal gene, there is two there the two the they make more with having a sickle cell trait. They actually make more normal cells than sickling cells. The percentage of sickling cells is very little. So therefore, the normal cells pretty much keep those that have the sickle cell trait healthy. But those that are in sports, they have seen some studies that those that have the sickle cell trait, that in studies have shown that those if they're in sports and the intensity of exercising can actually cause, with after long periods, also can actually cause some cells to sickle. And that has been known in previous past studies to even show some mortality with those having sickle cell trait. Sickle cell trait has been also connected to a particular cancer. So we have to understand too the underlying conditions and knowing the status of sickle cell trait. A lot of times, just past people would say sickle cell trait is really no big deal. Their majority of times, those are living are very healthy. But it's important, of course, for family planning, for those to know their status, as well as the health issues that can be associated with sickle cell trait. We're finding out more as they are dedicating more study to sickle cell. We're finding out more. So that is very important to also know. Now, with sickle cell disease, we know that there are complications, and the complications can start as early as 6 months. From 3 to 6 months, because they've noticed some children, basically with your immune system, they tend to just those with normality will basically have fetal hemoglobin protected by their mom. That's passed down to the child. This fetal hemoglobin level is particularly seen to be covering those with sickle cell disease, that they may not show any complications. And there are different types of sickle cell. I mentioned that one parent may have a sickle gene, and one may have another type of abnormal gene, abnormal. So I want to make it clear when I'm saying abnormal gene. So with that abnormal gene, there are now many variants of the sickle cell disease that exist, and there's about 300. But
wow.
Yes.
Because I don't mean to cut you off, because you really caught my attention. I have a mother-in-law who has sickle cell, and during that time, when she started showing symptoms, they didn't know what it was. because a lot of the studies are really fairly new, and I don't think we realize how new they are. And I have a cousin that has sickle cell as well. And so knowing that I personally know two people with sickle cell, they don't go through the same things, but I've always thought that it was just sickle cell. I didn't know that there were different variants of sickle cell.
Yes. So talking a little bit about the variants, there is sickle cell SS, which you get two genes, S gene and a S gene from the both parents. So that child has sickle cell disease. And then you may have sickle cell S and then sickle C, which is another abnormal sickle cell disease. And then you may have sickle S from one parent, and then you'll have another gene which you get sickle beta thal, which is a lot known for those in the European heredity. So those with sickle beta thal, there's sickle beta thal 0, sickle beta thal plus. My son happens to have sickle cell beta thal 0. And just in case I didn't get to mention, I'm a mom that has a child with sickle cell disease, which pretty much which contributed to my role of being an advocate and a mom, drawing into the community to learn more and also be an advocate. So just to explain, those are some of the variants. There's also S gene and E gene, which is more less common, but there are many variants. And then with having many variants, one person's experience might be a little different than the other. Why is that? They're still studying this. They're still studying why one may be a little bit different than the other, why one may have more complications, why one may have more, I mentioned pain crisis that can be mild to severe. Why is that? Then I explained also one thing they have studied, and they noticed that those with sickle cell SS and those with sickle cell S beta thal 0 tend to be, those individuals tend to have more complications with sickle cell. Reported complications, I should say. They noticed that those particular variants tend to have problems with the spleen at an early age, because remember when I said sickle cell affects organs, there's children that need their spleen removed, and those that just have other complications with stroke. So one thing that we do know with that particular variant with S beta thal 0 and those that have SS, they do know from studies that they don't produce any normal normal cells, A cells. So that is another thing that's been interesting. But with having SC, they do present a small percentage of producing some normal cells, but they produce more sickled cells. So they do have some studies showing that the complications and the variants tend to differ. One unique thing I'll share about sickle cell. Remember that I said there's fetal hemoglobin. So the fetal hemoglobin is interesting for this particular disease. So sickle cell pretty much kind of was in the continents of Africa when they did the study on malaria, they noticed that a lot of individuals had this abnormal gene when they started to test for sickle cell. And then something they noticed was those that had notably had sickle cell trait seem to not be sick or have no mortality relating to having malaria. Now, those that they test that had sickle cell disease was pretty much, they noticed that there was mortality with the disease and having the sickle cell disease and malaria. So when they noticed this, when they did this study, they realized that those that have sickle cell traits seem to have some protection from having malaria. And that came up a great big study to say that this genetic disorder may be a bad thing to have a disease, but it actually protected from the disease malaria. So that is has been an interesting finding when it came to sickle cell and malaria. And then we know that when they speak about fetal hemoglobin, I spoke to you about fetal hemoglobin. The unique thing about sickle cell disease is that those that do not have sickle cell disease, and I'm talking about don't have the trait or don't have the disease at all. So a normal person, more figured, I would say normal, right? Because they don't have both. So a normal person, normally their fetal hemoglobin will last from 3 to 6 months. That means that protection that was passed on from the mother to the newborn pretty much protects that child's immune system, starts to fade away from 3 to 6 months. What's been unique about those living with sickle cell disease, they tend to hold on to that fetal hemoglobin all the way up to adulthood, and that fetal hemoglobin level tends to be very high at times. And those that have studies have shown those that have a high level of fetal hemoglobin, and I'm talking about there's adults living with fetal hemoglobin that have sickle cell. My son is also one of them. If they have a high fetal hemoglobin, it has shown something. Most of the time, they have less complications, and the less complication is pretty much the acute pain crisis, where that we call that we pretty much see as a mild to severe crisis. They have less crisis that pretty much affords for hospitalization also, because that's another thing. Pain could be mild to severe, but the history have shown with sickle cell disease, there's associated with hospitalization as well as the child having other complications. So we have to understand that. And one of the things I have to say, and I want to make it clear, when I mention other complications, when we think about stroke, when we think about impact of organs, and sometimes it's over time, and then the risk of infections, that is another big thing. And some of the infections are not able to be treated with medication. It's difficult to fight off. So we're talking about lifespan, right? Early lifespan. Right now, the lifespan provided by, I want to say CDC, right now is about 45.
Wow.
With sickle cell disease. Now that's actually, sad to hear that sickle cell disease actually been related to the study with lifespans. But in the past, for over 20 years ago, we were thinking that, no one wants to talk about lifespan, but without medications, the lifespan used to be 20 years old. So sickle cell disease have also been associated with early death. So we have to bring that to light, that the education is real. The education on sickle cell traits is real, because now we have learned that there are complications associated with sickle cell traits when it comes to exacerbation of sports, and that it can impact the organs of those with sickle cell trait also, because they do produce sickled cells, but they have more normal cells. So thank you for bringing up that picture. Again, the sickled cells are abnormal. They usually have that sickled shape. An abnormal cell is usually soft. Pretty much oxygen flows very smoothly. It flows very smoothly when it's going through the vessels. And when we think about cells, we also have to think about it's reaching every single organ. It has a big job to do when we talking about transplanting organ, transplanting oxygen, right? So
Right.
it's so important.
I have a question for you, Carla.
Sure.
Do you find, or is there studies on, because I know, for instance, my mother-in-law has a very strict, very strict diet. She has shared there are certain things that she cannot eat because of her having sickle cell. So have you found, for instance, in your case with your son, that certain foods trigger, in essence, a crisis or reaction because he has sickle cell?
So from an early time when because I was just so dedicated to find out and learn as much as I can for my child to just live as healthy as possible, I found out that foods do impact, the health, and some foods cause inflammation. One of the things that contributes to inflammation is, of course, you know, things that are acidic. So when we think about oranges, when we think about tomatoes, so we try to avoid foods that would include that. Now understand, orange has vitamin C and and has its benefits. So we're not trying to avoid it fully, right? But just be
Right.
very cautious of how much we eat or how much we drink. The other thing, of course, acidic is soda. It has no neutral benefits, maybe enjoyable, but have no neutral benefits. So understanding how that impacts. One of the things that, which I'll share a little bit, sharing our journey also, and then when I speak about sickle cell disease and how everyone's different, my son, pretty much, like I stated, have sickle beta thal, and pretty much I was always very cognitive of, his condition, and basically learning so much about what can keep him healthy. And one of the things that I did is basically make sure, because we're Caribbean, from Jamaica, West Indies. We keep a, and I don't like to call it diet, but we keep an eating habit that's more healthy lifestyle, right? So
Right.
we eat curry chicken. We eat you know
Yes.
I'm one that don't pretty much don't eat red meat in my house. I have another daughter that's vegetarian. Um and my kids both, they like red meat and chicken. So basically, being able to attend to the meals that we have, I keep less pepper because I don't want that to pretty much spike anything. So having
Right.
pepper, but using less salt too, because remember I spoke about impacting the organs, and there's certain things. At the age of 9, my child was diagnosed with pretty much having high blood pressure. and
Wow.
been on high blood pressure. He's now 19 and been on high blood pressure pills over 10 for now about 10 years now. So when we think about the health and thinking about a child, and we have certain things, and I just want to share certain things that are helpful that we have in our foundation. We have put together some information. So things with vitamin A, mangoes, papaya, cantaloupe, carrots, yam, sweet potatoes, spinach, kale. So when I look at how we can introduce things, and these things are good, providing vitamin, right? We need the vitamin to build our blood. So when I thought
Right.
about vitamin, we went to a special herb doctor that pretty much educated me on the foods, what can help him. Some of the things, vitamin B12. So baked snapper, steamed shrimp, baked
Oh,
salmon, poultry. For those that are vegetarian, using supplements. And then vitamin
Right.
C, our broccoli. So greens are so important, right? For
yes.
building the blood. Greens are so important just for everybody, right? So when it contributes to
Right.
our health. So when we talk about vitamin C, kiwis, using Brussels sprouts, also strawberries are good. Vitamin E, mustard seeds, sunflower seeds, almonds, peanuts, hazelnuts,
Right.
corn, soy oils. One important thing for those with blood disorders, not only sickle cell, but when we think about blood disorders, those that are essential is folic acid, building up that blood. Even those that had treatments that things have impacted their blood. So papaya, these are the things with folic acid. Papaya, asparagus, spinach, romaine lettuce, black beans, pimento beans, lentils. So there's a few things. And then we
Right.
can't forget about vitamin D. Sun exposure is so important. We
Definitely.
don't think
Yes.
sun exposure. And for some reason we have and I hope they do a study on it because we talk about it in the community. Those living with the sickle cell trait seem to they get diagnosed with vitamin D deficiency. I know I have.
It's funny.
So
It's funny you mentioned that. My husband and his sister both have the trait. So there are certain things that they both have recognized that they experience. The vitamin D deficiency is one of them, but they also deal with bone pain.
okay.
It's not severe, but they both have these similarities of symptoms that they deal with, and they both carry the trait. And so the vitamin D deficiency is something that significantly that he's had to deal with. And I wouldn't have
Yeah.
never thought that it was related to the trait.
Yeah. It could be. And we spoke about this. We've been speaking about it in the community that a lot of those with sickle cell trait start to, have some conversations, say, I've been diagnosed with vitamin D deficiency and I've been diagnosed. And those that live with sickle cell trait, of course, you're producing some sickle cells. So sometimes they're impacted by anemia. And that could be, treated with many different herbs, many, different supplements in order to help that. Personally, I've had an issue with anemia issues. Sometimes it's worse than others, and it's definitely a choice. I stay so much. It's about self-care, right? I stay so much on top of my son's care that I neglect my own. So I'm trying to get better at that because I know how much it impacts me. So, and then when I thought about it, I said, Carla, you're actually also impacting your organs, right? Because you have
Right.
to keep bringing, because the sickle cells only last from 15 to 20 days. Their lifespan is very short. Normal cells last 120 days.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So those with don't have sickle cell, their normal producing cells last 120 days. When sickled cells last, so you imagine how hard the body is working to keep producing cells that don't live long.
But then that when you know, and maybe this is just my process, because of the body is having to work like, well, it's in overdrive, it's in overtime, right? So because of the body is working so hard, to me it just kind of explains to, you know, when you think about, although again it's not something we really like to talk about, but also the lifespan of a person who has sickle cell.
Yes.
Because if the body is working in overdrive, it's not just the blood stream that's working in overdrive, it's the entire system that's having to work in overdrive.
And that's why when we talk about sickle cells, also when we can see when the big issue is, of course, you know, the oxygen, right? And
Right.
We have had success with medication actually helping to help the cells a bit. Now, I'll go into that a little bit more. So, we first had a medication called hydroxyurea, the only medication that pretty much helped to produce fetal hemoglobin, keep the fetal hemoglobin, and have it rise. This was a medication that's still being used. It's a chemo drug that has now been repurposed, also used in cancer, but now been repurposed for sickle cell, and they realized that it had another benefit: low dosage of a chemo drug that's not have been used now as a sickle cell treatment. So this has been used for some time now. And just to let you know how sickle cell disease is a little bit different and complicated, with this fetal hemoglobin, and those that reach adulthood and still have this fetal hemoglobin, sometimes they have a high percentage of fetal hemoglobin that will help protect them, that they have less complications, less crisis, because these fetal hemoglobin is like normal cells, basically helping the normal cells.
Wow.
And it helps. So a lot of times I've explained to people, my son had a fetal hemoglobin, pretty much it was pretty high for a very long time. The doctor was watching it. His complications did not start until, I would say, more related to sickle cell, was until he was about 6 years old, because he had a high fetal hemoglobin. As soon as the fetal hemoglobin started to decrease, and they noticed that at 12, when he hit puberty, that's when he actually had more complications with sickle cell. Prior to that, the complications he had was risk of infections, bronchitis. We were hospitalized for other things prior to that when he was 6, and precautionary measures. But our issues with sickle cell, actual complications, I would say, started at 6 and progressed at the age of 12. So it's so different, and it makes a difference with, we'll say, health habits of eating, and also with things that we know. Swimming can trigger those that have sickle cell to go into a pain crisis in any area. Now, a pain crisis can happen. We have to understand that this can happen in any area, because there also what tends to happen with boys at a young age, they tend to start to have a painful erection, and this is having a pain crisis in their groin area, and causing, complication, which if continued, because that's blood actually clogging in that area, right? Because that's happening. So if it's not treated or continues to happen without them having particular treatments in order, now sometimes they have to use exercise. Sometimes they have to actually seek medical attention. That medication is given. Also, sometimes it's surgery actually needed. So if it's not treated, some males can suffer going having being infertile because of this issue. There are so many complications that could be associated with sickle cell disease itself that it's best to be evaluated with those living with sickle cell disease. And now I will also say those living with sickle cell trait should also ask questions.
Right. So let me ask you a question. Because we hear about the different things that people are having to go through dealing with sickle cell, including what families are seeing loved ones go through or going through the process with them. And I would like to know, like, what does that do to the person mentally and emotionally? Like, what are the things that you've experienced and your family have experienced with your son that you've gone through, and not just what you've gone through, what has given you the inspiration or the encouragement as you go through the process?
Okay, so being that I was pretty much well-rounded in the community, I kind of adjusted to my faith, and that's as a caregiver. So I've adjusted to my faith to go through when I go through tough times. And when I'm talking about tough times, seeing your loved one in excruciating pain. And we're talking at pain level of a 10. And the uncertainty of knowing what this day may bring. It's hard. Right. And I can't even express as a parent, much less as what he goes through as a person living with this disorder. It's a day by day process. And so what I have used is my faith and encourage him with our faith in God, who he is.
Right.
Because this disease has also been known to affect those mentally. Stress.
Right.
Contribute to stress when you have life plans, school plans. One of the things that my son faced living with the disorder was when I told you that he was pretty much the disease was present, really aggressive when he was 12. Started to be very aggressive. Fetal hemoglobin went down. This meant to us more frequent hospitalizations, more time away from siblings, missing family occasions. He was in the hospital sometimes every 2 months, in pain month by month. So even though he was hospitalized and it was treating the pain, physically being able, I would have to manage pain crisis when we're out of the hospital still on a monthly basis. So they can get us down to maybe a 4 when we're looking at the pain scale, but we're not pain free. And that is one of the things with sickle cell disease. And sometimes when they get older or when the disease gets aggressive, there's pain, acute pain that has to be addressed in the hospital. But there could be ongoing pain, which is caused by erosion of the hip, erosion of bones, because remember, this is a disease of the hemoglobin. So that means it's affecting the bones.
Correct.
And it's impacting, organs, tissues, cells. So we got to understand that. So our hospitalizations lasted almost for 2 years going in and out the hospital. He was a hospital homebound student, which means I had him enrolled in school, but he could not attend normal school like other children. The teacher came to our home in order to instruct him, give him his work at times when he can finish and follow up with his teacher, but he could not attend school like regular kids because he was in and out the hospital. And then putting his system at risk and more stress was not going to be efficient. There was no way he can keep up with as a child at school. He was in and out the hospital almost every 2 months or every other month. It depends how sickle cell wanted to act during that time. So,
right, because you have no control over it. It controls you and your day-to-day and your interactions and, what your plans are throughout the course of the day.
Yes. Mea, you had a question?
Yeah. Now I got to think back to what I was going to ask. It'll come to me, but we're getting close to the time. Before we go, I really want to touch on your foundation. If you could share a little bit about your Kids Conquering Sickle Cell and some of the services that you offer.
Yes, Kids Conquering Sickle Cell is a nonprofit organization, 501c3 organization that was pretty much birthed from 2014, but pretty much started being that we were doing services, started as a support group in 2004. We started as a support group at a hospital. And we kind of decided and saw the need in the community that we had to build upon having an organization. And we have programs with provides aid, which is provide gift cards and such aid to those living with sickle cell disease, as well as other blood disorders, related blood disorders. We also provide programs. So we know that sickle cell disease also impacts those with sickle cell traits. Education is key. We have educational programs that we do. We do a conference. We do sessions. We have learning and also fun sessions, which we engage the community. And we also have other programs, which just pretty much helping those individuals living with sickle cell to feel empowered. We have a Young Adult Sickle Cell Alliance program, which is there to educate and bring together those living with sickle cell disease that's in transition, because there are some barriers. Sickle cell disease is also pretty much, unfortunately, tends to be associated with just minorities. So there is discrimination, and there's some disparities that definitely need to be addressed that's associated with sickle cell disease. And so we have a lot of programs which we pretty much help to educate the community and support the community. One of our programs that we developed was another program, which is our international program, our international One Love program. You can bring up that picture. The One Love, this is some of the programs that I spoke about. This is not the One Love, but this is, that's my son, me and my son in that picture. This is our Christmas. We did a Christmas drive-by, and that was really awesome. Because of COVID, we changed the way things do. We participate in health fairs, and pretty much the life of the warriors that live with sickle cell disease it's a constant battle. There's a picture of my son pretty much getting his labs taken. And I have a little saying poem there, which is basically saying, not really poem. Take care of the people you love, but take even better care of the people that love you. I feel that is so important. We have to be able to put our heart in taking care of the people that we love. Next picture. This is our One Love program. We was able to go to Montego Bay, and we also had a group that went to Black River, which we were also going. The program is basically have developed from 2020 and came into fruition 2021, that we're able to educate those living with sickle cell disease about their health, and then also provide them health kits. The health kits have a heating pad, a thermometer. There's a coloring book in there that is fits for adults or any age, and some resources in there, educational resources that they can refer to, and a few other things. We were able to develop this program, and we already have a program here that we give kits to our young adults, and we have different kits with different programs. So we were able to deliver this to warriors living in Jamaica, and it was awesome experience. We went in August, and I cannot tell you how happy and pleased I am that I was able to go to Jamaica, and we had some presenters, two warriors that also was there that shared their experience, that traveled from the U.S., that shared their experience living in sickle cell and healthy habits. I cannot tell you how thrilled the warriors were and the caregivers were, and even new moms providing information and just saying how awesome it is to know that they have people that care, and just sharing what they didn't know, and now what they do know, and some help tips that will help them. So we're glad that that program exists.
Carla, thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. And you have shared so much vital information in regards to sickle cell. And is there any final words that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yes. Thank you for having me once again. One of the key things that I want to say is you can be a part of our fight against sickle cell. We have a community that depends on blood drives in order for them to get transfusion therapy, and their exchange therapy. And then when they have complications, of course, one of the treatments is also having a blood transfusion. We need minority donors. We need minority donors that is willing to donate blood and increase our supply of minority blood donors. The blood banks are definitely available and will work with you, being able to test your blood if you have any concerns. Also, we need bone marrow donors. Bone marrow donors, sickle cell disease, one of the curative therapies is bone marrow transplant. It's not available to everyone. There are risks involved, so it's a personal choice. And it's not, we don't have a universal cure, but we do have bone marrow transplant that is a curative therapy that is offered to some sickle cell patients, but they also have to have a match. And the match is more closely related to those that are minority race, right? So understanding that too is definitely important for our community. Also, I want to stress upon sickle cell is not an African American disease. As Mea started, she spoke about different nationalities that it impacts, those that from different places, Mediterranean. We know that there have been those have migrated, those with the Hispanic background. We know that the gene is present in a lot of minority groups as well as it is present in Caucasians. So it's important to know your status. The newborn testing is not everywhere. So if you come from a different Caribbean or a different place and haven't been tested, and even the status in the United States, not everyone shares with their child what their gene status. That is why we have a lot of people that didn't know they had sickle cell disease, even though newborn testing is present. A lot of parents don't share that information ongoing with a child. And then a child is produced when two people that have the trait get together. So we do know that it's important to have be tested. One of the tests that you can ask for to know your gene status, not only for sickle cell, but a hemoglobin gene status, is the electrophoresis test. It does test for an abnormal hemoglobin gene. So please know your status as well as join our fight against sickle cell. There's much work to do. If you're interested in doing more work in the community and even joining our efforts at Kids Conquering Sickle Cell Disease, or even another nonprofit organization, please, I ask that you join our fight. My information for Kids Conquering Sickle Cell is kidsconqueringscd.org. That's our website. So you can always communicate with us. There's a contact information. My contact information via email is clewis@kidsconqueringscd.org, as well as we're on the social media platforms at Kids Conquering SCD or Kids Conquering Sickle Cell Disease Foundation on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn as well as Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you, Carla. Lady Q, I know you have some final words you would love to share before we close out the show.
Definitely. I just want to just leave a few words of wisdom. And I think one of the biggest things that I received is understanding that all sickle cell is not the same. And I think in society, even today, a lot of us think that all sickle cell is the same. And not only that aspect, but those who have the trait don't have anything that they're going through. So I think, the biggest aspect of wisdom that I've taken away from this is the understanding that, again, all sickle cell is not the same, and that if you have the trait, that you could be having symptoms from having the trait. And then on top of that, knowing that the mental health has to be taken care of through this process. Those that are going through sickle cell, the families that are going through it with them, there are things that they go through on a day-to-day basis. And again, Carla have told us how it's a day-to-day process. So she doesn't know what her day-to-day is because of her son going through this process, and how many more out there that are dealing with the same thing. And there are a lot that are suffering also in silence, that don't share what they're going through. And so right now, I just want to encourage those that are going through the process, the families that are out there with them that are going through the process, to be encouraged through this and to lean on what gives you hope to keep going, to lean on what gives you that thing that helps keep you grounded. Lean onto that and hold on to that, and to keep pressing forward through the process for those that are having to engage through this journey with sickle cell. And tomorrow's not promised, and it's not just focused on sickle cell. Tomorrow's not promised for any of us, but just think about those that are having to go through that process and the lifespan that the doctors say that they have. And so again, I encourage you that if you If you don't know your status, like Carla said, know your status, know where you stand, not only for yourself, for your bloodline, for generations to come, so that they know what's ahead of them. So those are my words of wisdom for this evening.
And I just want to share also that it's so important for not only knowing your status for yourself, but for family planning. It's definitely a discussion to have about the possibility of having a child with sickle cell disease, and also understand that we understand that our community has showed medical studies to show that our community living with sickle cell have shown just an increase of those living with sickle cell up until the age of 90s. And so even though studies have shown what the lifespan is, we know what living well with sickle cell can look like, with new treatments, with better care, with quality care, and with food choices. So we understand now what living well with sickle cell can look like, and that sickle cell is not a death sentence. There's quality of life for those living with sickle cell. So that's a great inspiration to us all, that we must join the fight and continue to do what's necessary in order this battle against sickle cell.
Thank you so much, Carla.
Thank you.
I would like to invite you all to check out the latest issue coming later this week, featuring on the cover Dr. Reverend Karen Green, and also follow us on our social media platform on Facebook and Instagram at official KUO Magazine, official Men of Culture 365, official Women of Culture, and on Facebook at G.L.O.W 365 Virtual Show, at Ribbons of Survivors 365, and also subscribe and like us on YouTube at official KUO Magazine and official Women of Culture. I would like to thank my G.L.O.W team and our special guest, Carla Lewis, which have shared so much vital information today on the show about sickle cell. And don't forget, you can visit her online at Kids Conquering SCD. Kids Conquering SCD.org. And also you as the viewers. I'm Coach Mea, coming to you from Ocoee, Florida. And remember, kids show so much strength as warriors. So let's keep loving on them and letting them know that they can conquer anything in spite of their illness or condition. Thank you all for tuning in to G.L.O.W. Until next time, be well and stay safe.
Maybe I'm painting blue.